All right, welcome. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to implement generative AI solutions in the enterprise. And most importantly, we're going to cover some very common mistakes to avoid before you start training a generative AI model with your enterprise data. So our goal in this interview is to help you avoid wasting millions of dollars and years of work when all that work needs to be redone in the future. So I'm joined with Ryan Dunn from IdeaGrid.AI. And Ryan, how about you just give us a quick little intro and background on yourself?
You bet, Ray. And thanks for the invite. My name's Ryan Dunn. I'm the founder of IdeaGrid. And my background, I've got 20 years in software engineering. I was formerly a director of IT over at H&R Block, where I oversaw their customer service technology. And I was able to bring generative AI as part of that solution with my time at H&R Block, which was the inspiration to start IdeaGrid. And we support businesses to implement generative AI technologies to support their business and technology operations.
Nice. And for those that don't know me, I'm Ray Marquez. I'm the founder of High Rise Talent, an Oracle partner consulting firm doing Oracle Cloud implementations. I also am the founder of WorkStreamer, which is a productivity tool for enterprise software consultants. So first question I have for you is, why is Gen AI important for enterprises today? And what opportunities are available now that weren't just a few years ago?
Yeah, I mean it's a really exciting space. Why it's important for enterprises is it allows a path to a solution that previously wasn't possible. The ability for an understanding of language and the generation of previously unmade content really opens up some real interesting opportunities. And I think a great analogy to think about with respect to generative AI is the Industrial Revolution. It during that time and also now, we've got a path to enhance our workers' skill sets in ways that were previously not possible. Specifically, we were able to have huge efficiency gains and reach scale on various processes that previously just simply weren't possible. It's a really, really exciting time, and it allows you to think about your core business competency differently. Some opportunities that I've seen in the market that have been amazing to watch was synthetic experimentation, where you're actually able to leverage generative AI in a virtual environment to run virtual experiments. And that means not only can you do them much quicker, but you could do them over a wider range of data at a cheaper cost. So you're able to, much, much more efficiently use your physical resources and avoid costly mistakes. Another one that I think we're all going to start to see is virtual support for retail and digital products. The technical depth of generative AI is far beyond humans. And so, getting the answer to that very specific question you're running into, Gen AI can be really effective for that, and also seamlessly transition you over to a live human support if that's needed. And the last one I think is going to be amazing to watch is personalization at scale. You're going to start to see marketing content that's tailored to you exactly and your needs. So a lot of real interesting stuff coming down the pipe, and I'm excited to see it all hit the market.
Yeah, I mean that's interesting you say it's like the Industrial Revolution, because if you think back to the Industrial Revolution, there were several key technologies that enabled that. I think it was like electricity, the
Mhm.
telephone, mechanization in factories and cars and things like that. So several key technologies converged, and that launched the Industrial Revolution. And if you look at where we're at now, we have something like I think ARK Investments have said something like 16 different technologies converging right now: robotics, AI, the human genome. I mean, there's
Mhm.
just on and on and on and on. And so, I mean, this AI revolution is part of a much greater technological, I guess, renaissance and evolution that's I think just kicking off. So, I mean, it's really exciting.
Totally agree. It's a fun space to be in.
Yeah. So let's circle back to enterprises. So if there's someone, maybe a leader in an enterprise, they want to bring generative AI to their organization. What's the first step? Where do they start?
The first step, and I think it's going to become a really, really important one as we continue to see innovation in the space, is a real strong business case. we can throw all this tech at it, but at the end of the day, what's the core competency of your business? You've got to really defend that and know strategically where you fit in the market. So that absolutely would be the first step. Know your business before you're going to bring generative AI into it. Once you've kind of determined a good use case that supports, strategically your core competency, I think it's really important to define what success looks like for that use case. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to be more efficient? Are you trying to increase profit, reduce time? Know what that success metric is, and also know what it's worth to your business. That's going to allow you to right size your investment around generative AI rather than kind of just throw money down a hole and see how far you go. A great example of that while I was at H&R Block was, I led a consolidation of our customer support platforms for all of H&R Block's retail products. And, we went through an effort to audit all of the top call drivers, determine which ones were candidates for generative AI, and then determine an efficiency metric based on each one of those call drivers. All that work rolled up together ultimately to determine what dollar amount we projected to save when we put generative AI in as part of our customer support platform. And so I think that's a really good North Star to use because it keeps you focused on right sizing the solution for your business rather than kind of putting some brand new arbitrary technology in an area where you're not quite sure how it's going to impact things.
Yeah, I mean that makes perfect sense. I mean, we see so much on the internet, LinkedIn, in seminars and conferences. AI is everywhere, and everyone's saying you need to do AI. Well, we can't just do AI for the sake of AI. We need to have an actual business case. We need to quantify how AI is going to impact our business and how we're going to get a return on the investment. And yeah, without that, I mean, it's just like adding features for fun almost. I mean, we're just kind of wandering off, and I could see a lot of companies wasting money just without a defined business case to follow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a lot like moving to the cloud, about 10 years ago where, you really needed to know what it was going to cost you before you got there. Just don't run to the cloud because it's available. And I'd say this is kind of the similar logic and discipline.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that brings us perfectly to the next question I have. What mistakes do you see organizations make when they first get started with generative AI?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's an interesting space, and you do see some, kind of missteps along the way. I think a common one I see is that, companies buy off the shelf solutions. A lot of times they're bolted onto SaaS platforms, or, maybe you just got everybody access to Chat GTP. Those are all fine, but you need to be realistic about what impact that's going to make to your business. And chances are it's not going to be a material one. I definitely think you're going to see kind of short-term gains and I'd say minor improvements to various processes. However, I think expecting kind of an off-the-shelf uncustomized solution that doesn't formally integrate your whole data stack isn't really going to make a material difference. um, you know that kind of leads me to another mistake I see, which is when companies start to get into generative AI, and I'll say that I'm guilty of this as a technologist as well. you know, Jumping too quickly to implementation, when you really don't understand the data that you have around the process you're trying to apply generative AI to. So just because you can integrate a chatbot into your website, don't jump to the technical implementation. First, you need to really test and tune that model. You need to integrate your own data into it, and you need to understand what gaps you currently have. It's naive to think that your data is bulletproof right out the gate when you've never applied it to a generative AI use case. I think the last one I'd say, and it kind of follows along that same mode of thinking, is be realistic about when you invest in a model. Because what's your real life expectancy of that model? There's innovations constantly. Agentic AI is evolving rapidly. Point being, you're going to see things change quickly. And the cost of trained models is expensive. So be real intentional about where you put those dollars. And I would also, I'm a real big advocate for RAG architectures and semantic layers, which provide an alternative path to just formally training models based on your data sets.
Nice. So what I heard you say was a big mistake is just buying off-the-shelf software,
Mhm.
thinking that's all you need to do. Like, hey, we have ChatGPT, we have AI now. That's really only just dipping your toes into it.
Yeah.
Uh, and then the second one, not having like I guess you could say clean data or enhanced data, not having your data ready to go for generative AI. If you put
Yeah.
in garbage data, you're going to get garbage AI out of it, no matter how good the model is.
That's right. And I think part of it, maybe another way to look at it is you don't know till you get in there. So don't make assumptions on how good your data is or is not until you get it in a model. And I think that's really going to start to guide you on how good your data is. But I think the main point I want to make is don't make assumptions, right? Like get in there and know what you've got and realize, especially if it's your first step into this technology, there's going to be some learning curves around the depth of your data. So it's a common mistake.
Great, that makes total sense. And then the last one you said was basically training the model without having that lens on the future of
Mhm.
thinking, thinking that this model is going to last us forever. I mean, the Gen AI space is evolving so rapidly. I mean, we just saw the DeepSeek tool come
Yeah.
out, and it seems like all the time there's a new evolution in AI. And if we commit too much to one Gen AI model, we design our whole infrastructure around it. That can really limit us in the future if a new technology comes out and we're already so invested in this. So we need to have that, like you said, the RAG architecture and semantic layers to give that flexibility for the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's great. Uh, so, um, so what are the most public generative AI fails that you've seen? I mean, just to give us a sense of what can go wrong when it's not done correctly, and these warnings that you just gave aren't heeded.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think we've seen a couple of them. Like I think the market tries to move pretty quickly when these public failures occur. The breach of Samsung's parts of their code base were plugged pretty quickly. Obviously, ChatGPT, I mean, and OpenAI, they want to make sure that people view them as secure, but issues happen all the time. I mean, I think the humorous one is the Delta Airlines example where a customer jumped in and was asking questions about how to transport a deceased relative, and a very viable question for a customer support line. They were trying to figure out the best way to do that, but they were interacting with Delta Airlines generative AI chatbot. Well, as they were doing it, the chatbot said, "Yeah, you just need to buy a normal ticket." Sounds simple enough. And so, of course, the individual did buy a ticket for their deceased relative. And when they approached the airline, obviously, you can't use, I'll say, traditional means of flight for that type of situation. And ultimately, Delta Airlines had to honor the commitment that the generative AI chatbot used or that made to that customer.
Mhm.
And so I think, you're going to continue to see some real interesting failures. And I think it really kind of highlights an opportunity that you know, any application of generative AI at scale needs to really be governed by a center of excellence to guide strategically how generative AI is used in that specific company. And specifically, you need to bring in folks with expertise in HR. You need legal representation. You need to understand liability concerns. And it's unique to each specific use case, but really making sure that your business fundamentals are covered because it's the same liability and challenges and risks you're going to have offering any new product. This one just doesn't happen to have a human involved. And so, really thinking through those things are really important. And, I'll take a second to acknowledge and really advocate for all of you folks with real core, expertise that are outside of technology. You're more important than ever. And this is a great example of where we need your help.
Nice. No, it makes total sense. So set up a generative AI center of excellence. Uh, so how can organizations avoid mistakes like this? I mean, we talked about the center of excellence, but can you walk us through like a best practice in terms of how to bring generative AI to the enterprise in a way that's safe, provides accurate results, and brings the highest return on investment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and this is the process that we take over at IdeaGrid. The first thing we do is really get aligned on the business use case, right? Before we ever hit any tech. And that's really to make sure that not only that it truly affects your bottom line, but also to, really agree on what success looks like. How are we going to measure the success of this effort? Um, because ultimately, when we test and tune a model, we can track exactly those types of metrics, almost exactly the same as if you'd bring in a full-time FTE, and what your expectations there. So, I think the first is don't forget the fundamentals, and apply those to a generative AI investment, just like any traditional one. The nuance becomes once you've defined those things, when you start to look at the technical side, that's where things get a little bit more interesting. We mentioned, the maturity of your data. And when we say that, what we mean is, the depth of your data in order to cover, training a generative AI model to answer the questions in a way that's going to be acceptable for your use case. And oftentimes that's no small feat, especially when you've never applied your data to a generative AI use case before. Um, you know, there's some underpinnings to that statement, which is where is your data stored? Is it in a traditional cloud infrastructure? Are we looking at SaaS platforms? And is the data structured or unstructured? All of those are variables to take into account when you're starting to look at a generative AI application for your business. But ultimately, once you kind of go through those things and you've kind of got a good, mature understanding of, what the state of your data is and even the gaps, then you can start to define, the fun stuff, the information architecture, the data taxonomy, and even get into some of the nuanced, advanced database types that are going to, really work well with generative AI, like a knowledge graph. So, once you get into that level, I think we're getting into some pretty specifics, which vary use case to use case. But ultimately, it's really kind of taking the time up front to understand the problem and the data you've got behind it.
Nice. So what I'm hearing is there's actually a lot of preparation that goes into deploying generative AI into the enterprise, and starting with the business, defining that use case,
Mhm.
defining the success criteria for that use case. Is it time? Is it money, etc. Uh, and then going into the tech side and checking your data, seeing if there's gaps in data, seeing if it's structured data, and working to structure that appropriately. Like for example, uh, a company needs to define if one piece of data should be accessible to employees only or employees and customers. So that's a very simple example of how you want to tell the AI how to handle this data and who has access to it. Uh, and then, and like you said, auditing the platforms to see how we can get that data into the generative AI, maybe APIs, integrations, etc., and then setting up those information architectures. I mean, it sounds like a strong process, a best practice to follow. So,
Yeah, yeah. I'll call out one nuance there that I think is worth mentioning is when we talk about unstructured data, what I mean is, text-based documentation. And a lot of folks are going to be using that for like maybe tier one customer support. Um, it's interesting when you go into train a generative AI model on unstructured data like that, because you're going to find holes that didn't exist before when you were training humans, because they can kind of infer and make assumptions where generative AI may not. And I think that that's a real good example of where WorkStreamer comes in, because you're going to be able to define those gaps when you start to run the audit. WorkStreamer works really well to kind of plug those gaps, right? You're going to find a process gap. Everybody's got them because you've never applied this to generative AI before. And you can plug those gaps with technologies like WorkStreamer, which are critical. And I've seen them firsthand where companies roll in and they go, oh, we've been running tier one customer support on this product for years. Our documentation, we got stacks of it. Well, you're going to get in there and some of those screens are not going to be documented because they're easy for people. Well, that's a blind spot. So, I think don't make assumptions about especially unstructured data, and what you've been using to train your staff for years, because it's used in a different way.
well, I appreciate the plug for WorkStreamer. But yeah, if there's anyone listening that doesn't know WorkStreamer, I have basically a tool in there that lets you install an extension to your browser, and then when you do a task, let's say in an enterprise system, it will record and take screenshots of everything that you do, and then you can compile that into a training guide. And as Ryan was saying, that training guide can be used to train AI pretty easily. So no, I appreciate you mentioning that. Uh,
Yeah, I
so
think those. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
so how can a company partner with IdeaGrid to deploy generative AI in their enterprise? And maybe you could share like what you offer and what an engagement would look like.
Yeah, yeah. As a partnership with IdeaGrid, we really take kind of the fundamentals of successful business investment to heart. And I've been kind of harping on it the whole time we've talked here, which is like be real clear and intentional about what you want as the impact of this effort to your business. And we will work to define it very, very clearly and then partner with you directly on those success metrics. If you're saying that a mean time to resolution for a specific set of customer inquiries is your goal, we'll partner with you on that metric to hit that. And I think that makes us fundamentally different. We don't approach it as a license fee or, anything kind of in the traditional software sense. We really do, lock arms and worked across the finish line together. So I think that's one of the core premise of what we do. I think the second point I'd make is that we approach it, as your trusted advisor to develop a long-term foundational data strategy. When we look at implementing generative AI, a real solid understanding of your data that we've talked about, plugging those gaps, testing the models, you know, that work should carry over for years. It shouldn't be a one time and then you implement it in Gen AI and then hope that model goes forever. It's unrealistic. And so the strategies that we're going to put forth have that long term foundational investment in mind. Um, and ultimately, it will help you reduce costs in the long term. It'll help you stay competitive as innovations occur. The market is wild. It's changing constantly. We mentioned agentic AI. Another one is multimodal support, which is where WorkStreamer can come in and supplement, even with images on top of, text information, where we're starting to bridge different types of media. It's really, really important to make sure that when you invest that time and money, it yields fruit for years to come. And those are the types of things that are really going to be important in a strategy, and that's really kind of what we pride ourselves on.
No, that makes perfect sense. I mean, foundation for the long term. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into this. Why not have a strategy that sets you up for success in the future? Like it's an expectation that things are going to change, and you want to be
Mhm.
able to switch data models, for example, and take advantage of new technology that comes out without retraining everything every time. So
Yeah.
it makes perfect sense. No, it makes perfect sense. Uh, so with that in mind, are companies right now creating ticking time bombs in a sense by not setting up their generative AI solutions with this kind of strategy?
I think in a sense, I think some are, because the challenge you've got, and especially at, kind of the mid-sized company level, is you may not have the technology staff that's inherently familiar with these types of innovations. And so it can be real appealing, um, especially if you've got, a lot of SaaS tools, to simply buy the next Gen AI feature that overlays a SaaS tool. And, that kind of goes back to the off-the-shelf discussion we were having before, where um, as a short-term strategy, it might help, but I think as a longer-term strategy, let's play that use case out. If you've got a SaaS solution for your customer service and your ticketing, if you lay generative AI right into that SaaS platform, it's going to have access to the data in that platform. It's going to know your ticketing information. Maybe it knows some custom information you've got. But what it doesn't have is all the other parts of your data. For example, marketing campaigns are a good one. Detailed product specs are another one. You know, what's going to end up happening is that you're going to be limited by what that SaaS platform can allow you to do with that data. And I'll say, a specific concern I have, and it's around building that foundational layer, is the lack of the ability to, in a sense, create relationships that you'd see in a graph database. Knowledge graphs are a key part of generative AI, and creating data relationships, that bridge what are previously kind of unrelated parts of your business are going to be critical. Those SaaS platforms have a very narrow view of your business. And so what you're going to end up doing is at some point hit a scale problem where you're going to have to integrate data that's outside that SaaS platform, and you're going to run into some problems. And so I think that also highlights an advantage. Companies who do maintain their data in a core cloud infrastructure, implying that you've got direct access to the database. Things like Oracle 23AI's database, Azure's cloud infrastructure. You know, those are areas where your technology folks have direct access to the data, which means that you can pull them out, restructure them, and establish new relationships with advanced database technologies that are really going to support you and build that foundational layer. And so I'm a little bit cautious about trying to build a generative AI strategy right on top of a SaaS platform. So I'd go in carefully. I think when you start to look at some of those situations.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. I mean, it's great that SaaS applications are adding generative AI to make their tools more efficient, but an organization shouldn't think that that's the ultimate Gen AI solution. I mean, really, long-term thinking, you need to have basically a holistic strategy of data integration. So, makes perfect sense. So, if someone wanted to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, you can go over to our website, which is IdeaGrid.AI, and we've got our contact information there. By all means, shoot me an email anytime. My email is RyanDunn@IdeaGrid.AI. I'd love to hear from you, and you know, I'm real passionate about generative AI. Even if it's not specifically a use case, but you just got some questions. For example, I just posted a prompt supporting education and specifically around dyslexia. Like, it's an amazing space. It's fun to talk and innovate and be creative. And so reach out. I'd love to connect.
That's perfect. So yeah, if you're listening to this and you want maybe like on a high level assessment just to get an idea of what's possible, definitely reach out to Ryan. Thanks, Ryan.
You bet. Thanks, Ray.